Hi guys, Sajid Amit here and welcome to yet another review, and this is yet another cable review. So if you've seen my work, you will see I'm one of the few reviewers who review a lot of cables, and of course cables are a poster child of, according to a lot of people, a poster child of whatever is wrong with this hobby. Because a lot of people are convinced that this hobby has a lot to do increasingly with manufacturers robbing us blind, and cables are snake oil because you cannot measure the change that this cable or any other cable induces with regard to the frequency response. So because of that sort of allegation, and it's true, cables so far haven't yet impacted frequency response. But I just urge you guys to, whoever has this view, to take a step back and consider the fact that the frequency response may not be the end-all be-all in terms of understanding what something sounds like. Because it's yet to be proven that the frequency response can and does suggest the level of resolution of a transducer, the level of dynamic impact, the level of soundstage width and soundstage depth, and imaging or timbre. So, I mean, just to give you an example, you can EQ a Focal Utopia, for example, which we'll review very soon, the Focal Utopia 2022, and you can EQ it to the same graph as a Harman target or the Sennheiser HD650, and it will never sound like the HD650 because the Focal Utopia has a distinctly metallic timbre in the treble, and that timbre will persist. Also, what you will find from the frequency response of the Focal Utopia, just because I'm talking about it, is that there's nothing in the graph that would suggest that it slams as hard as it does. The Utopia slams very hard, guys, and some of you will know this. There's nothing in the graph that would suggest that it should slam that hard. Or for that matter, if you look at the response of a Susvara and a Sundara, there's nothing in those graphs that tell these two headphones apart in terms of the fact that the Susvara is way more resolving or detailed and information in the track as compared to Sundara. You cannot tell these things from a graph. So I just urge you to sort of, suspend your disbelief, because cables do make a difference to the sound, and not always for the better. But cables do make a difference to the sound of an IM. In particular, I do think IMs are more sensitive to cable rolling than headphones are. And speakers also, I've noticed, show differences in their sonic presentation vis-a-vis cables. So this is none other than the Effect Audio Centurion, which is an enormously expensive cable. It is a flagship of Effect Audio, which is a very reputable brand based out of Singapore. So I just want you guys to know that Effect Audio is based out of Singapore. I have visited their lab in Singapore. I did not buy anything when I was there. I did not buy this from Effect Audio. I bought this from Music Tech because I love doing business with Andrew. A big shout out to Music Tech and Andrew, because he's an amazing gentleman and he's wonderful to work with. He's very kind, he's very polite, and they're just phenomenal to work with, guys. They've always been phenomenal to work with. I have bought most of my stuff from Andrew and Music Tech in the recent past. He sells a whole bunch of this stuff, including this $5,000 cable. I have the PW Orpheus right here, which is another very expensive cable, which was initially retailing for $6,000. I do believe you can have it for around $5,000 or so. I've already dropped review of this, so I will be drawing comparisons to the $6,000 cable because I do think they're somewhat equally matched, $5,000 and $6,000. Although, like I said, this can now be had as of January 2024 for $5,000. So they're somewhat equally priced. I have another cable here which I really love with the Dita Perpetua. It's also made by Dita. It's called the Celestia cable. It's a 6N silver cable made out of Mass Kondo silver wiring. Mass Kondo is, of course, very famous for their amplifiers and preamplifiers. So this is another very expensive cable. This retails for $2,700. I'll talk a bit about this. I'll talk about how the Centurion has sounded with all my IMs, including the Jewel, including the Dita Perpetua, and the Trifecta, which is one of my favorite IMs. This you see right here is around a $500 cable from Sima Acoustics in China. So a very nice cable. It looks and feels more premium than it is. And I want to talk about all this, guys, and I have a bunch of other cables here. But before I do all that, just to give you the specs of the Effect Audio Centurion, and none of this information came from the website because I was too lazy to look them up. I just went to the Headphonics review, which is a wonderful review of this cable, a very detailed review, and I'll drop a link to the Headphonics review in the description section of this video. If you want to check out the Headphonics review, do check it out. I do think it's wonderful. It's one of the best reviews of any cable that I've ever seen. So, it is a 26AWG8 wire cable. It's gold-plated silver gold alloy, UPOCC. 7-core bundling, multi-size stranding, and it has this Effect Audio Ultra Flexi insulation, which is just this awesome sort of a see-through insulation. It has a very shimmery effect, and I just love it, guys. I don't know to what extent the lighting here is able to capture the beauty and the radiance and the suppleness and the lack of memory and the extreme ergonomic nature of this cable, but it is just effing awesome. I still haven't taken out the plastic wrapping in around this Centurion helmet, sort of a splitter situation that's going on here. So it's still somewhat brand new, but I've broken this in. I've listened to a bunch of IMs with this. It is a wonderful cable, but before I talk more about its sound, I do want a disclaimer that I'm not going to cover its very elaborate and ornate unboxing in this video, which I do think is important. So I will cover the unboxing perhaps in a separate review, or maybe I'll just drop a quick YouTube short video just to show the unboxing, because it does come with enormous boxes that has accessories, that has this beautiful rosewood aluminum sort of shell with leather inside, this carrying case rather. It has a display stand made of glass and rosewood. So it has a lot of stuff, which frankly was not my cup of tea personally, because it adds shipping weight. And because I live in a part of the world where I have to ship everything to me and back, and it can become quite expensive, I wasn't a fan of the large boxes situation, but I do understand why Effect Audio, because it went all out with this wonderful cable, this gold and silver alloy cable. I do understand why they would want to, sort of furnish that sort of accessorization, because it does make you feel like you're paying for a premium cable and getting a whole bunch of things. And you can also display this cable, because this cable honestly is like audio jewelry for a lot of people. Now, this is Centurion. The Centurion is their flagship cable, like I said, an 8-wire situation going on, and 26 AWG. Now, this, from what I know, this silver gold alloy was one of the first in the aftermarket IM cable industry. Now, silver, of course, is widely considered to be one of the best conductors, if not the best. Now, people often talk about silver being somewhat bright sounding, somewhat clean sounding, and you often find a lot of variation in the sound of silver cables depending on what silver cable you're talking about, because this silver cable and this silver cable don't exactly sound the same. How, you may ask? I think this adds a bit of bass punch to the Perpetua, so much so that I feel like, especially when I'm using a CD player as a source, I do get a lot more bass impact with the Centurion and this cable. And this, I think, is slightly more neutral. I mean, I do think it's slightly aggressive, but not just because of the bass. I think overall, the presentation here becomes slightly more aggressive. But it's not definitively as bright as some cables can be. The Larry Silver Grand Line I do find brighter. Now, so this branch of engineering is called resistance engineering. So by mixing gold, because gold doesn't have the same conductivity and higher impedance in silver, it is surmised that the gold has something to do with, reducing the brightness of this, and that could well be the factor here, although I feel like the gold here is mostly used for its gold's anti-corrosion properties. But I mean, the gold does look very nice. It adds to the shimmery effect, and overall, guys, I mean, it's just a stunning cable. So that's about it for ergonomics and its looks and all that. I mean, you can obviously I can just, show it to you so you get a sense of how it lacks memory, it's soft, it is pliable, it's supple. And this is, of course, the 4.4 jack, which still has this plastic casing outside of it because I haven't taken it out. And then, of course, you have the Centurion helmet sort of situation going on with the splitter. It looks very nice and neat. I don't think it's too big. And then you get the high-quality IM sort of connectors. Of course, I have the MMCX plugged into this situation. I should mention that this is a Connex system, so you can swap out the MMCX connectors and use it with a 2-pin connector, which I have, which is how I've checked it out with the Perpetua, which has a 2-pin system going on, or the Trifecta, which has an MMCX situation going on, right? So that is pretty handy. Okay, so what does this sound like, and is it worth the price? Guys, I'll first talk about sound, and then I'll talk about value. Sound-wise, I get a pretty neutral presentation all across the frequency spectrum with a certain attack to it. It's got slightly speedier presentation, speedier transition in notes. The treble can be somewhat present. I'm not going to say it's bright. The treble, I feel like it does something to mid and upper treble so that an IM like the Trifecta, which sounds amazing at first blush because overall the Centurion has a pretty natural timbre. I do think complements the Trifecta's natural timbre, and I think the Trifecta ends up sounding pretty nice. However, I do feel I get a smoother treble with the Centurion I'm sorry, with the SEMA acoustics cable, which is a fifth of the price than I do with the Centurion. Now, should you buy the Centurion still because it is a more expensive cable? It depends on you guys. Technically, you might get 1 or 2% more resolution with the Centurion. You might get 1 or 2% deeper sound stage with the Centurion. You might get 1 or 2% blacker background with the Centurion. And overall, I would say it's a better and more technical cable, but I'm pretty happy with the SEMA acoustics cable here because I feel like it's a better tonal match. Now, when you get into buying a trifecta for $3,300, it's resolving, of course, but it's not at the same level of resolution as, let's say, a $5,000 IM like a Traley or a Jewel, Aroma Jewel. Then why do you buy it for so much money if it's not as resolving as, let's say, other IMs, even at this price range, like a Xenon 6? You buy this because of other reasons, because you get this bombastic bass, you get this wonderful sub and mid bass ratio, you get this wonderful timbre in mid range, and this wonderful timbre all across the frequency spectrum. So you buy this because it reminds you of something that's natural sounding. It plays back rock and metal very well. Now, if that's your jam, and if you're maybe an older person who handles treble much better, this might well be the perfect complement to the trifecta. However, if you have younger ears oftentimes, or just the sort of ear anatomy that makes you more susceptible to treble energy, you might want to audition this with the trifecta because it might not be the best possible pairing. This, on the other hand, with the Aroma Audio Jewel, which I don't have with me currently because someone borrowed it from me, the Jewels with this just come alive because the Jewel with the stock cable sounds pretty dead, pretty anemic, and pretty boring. I happen to think the Jewel can be tweaked to bring out an awesome sound. I mean, even the stock sound is pretty awesome, and this with the Aroma Audio Jewel does make the Jewel sound very, 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 very complete. It just complements the Jewel very well. It makes the Jewel sound more dynamic in the bass, a little more aggressive in the treble, because the Jewel does have a 4 to 7 kilohertz treble recession. So, I mean, it's a difficult situation, guys. I mean, you buy a very expensive cable, and if you have a bunch of expensive IMs, only then can you play around with this cable and come to a conclusion of whether this is worth it for you. I would not recommend this for everyone. Like, if you're saving up money to buy a cable, don't buy this cable, guys. Buy this cable if you are into audio jewelry. If money is no object, I mean, money is an object for everyone, regardless of how wealthy you are. But you buy this if you have a whole bunch of flagship IMs and then you want to spend money on a cable. Get the flagship IM situation sorted out first. If you're happy with the non-flagship IM, like a mid-tier IM between $500 to $1,500, all power to you because that's where a lot of value lies. Now, in terms of comparison with an Orpheus, which is, of course, a pure copper cable, which I've reviewed on this channel, the Orpheus, I feel like, still has a wider stage and more mid-bass, warmth, and is slightly darker sounding. But this, again, is brighter sounding, and I do think it has better stage depth than the Orpheus does. Resolution-wise, I think they're a tie, but this has a very distinct coloration. And this, I think, is ever so slightly more neutral than the Orpheus. So the Orpheus might be a slightly pickier customer. So you could wonder why buy cables that add so much coloration to the sound, which don't work with every IM. I mean, that's just what it is, guys. When you're paying so much money at the higher and higher end, you start catering to a more distinct niche customer base who pay more money to get, let's say, the resolution that this offers, the mid-bass warmth that this offers. So you do pay for coloration, guys. And at the early stage of the hobby, if you're buying $250, $500, let's say Moondrop IMs, they're all Harman-tuned, safe tuning, right? So that's just how the hobby works. In the early part of the price bracket, you get safer and safer stuff. And the more you pay, you get more colorful tunings and philosophies behind the sound. And they might not end up being for everybody. Like even the Trifecta, I feel like is a very divisive IM. So that's there. The Dita Perpetua, I do think, is an amazing IM, one of my favorites, and I'm glad that this is now picked up a bit in the West, and a lot of people on the water cooler thread on Headify have bought it, thanks to my insistence and other early buyers who have talked about this. So, in no means, was there any interest vested in me talking and praising this, because I just love this. And others who have followed suit and bought this also love it, so that makes me very happy. Now, this works well with the Centurion, works very well. I just happen to like the Dita Celesti cable because it's a better aesthetic match with the Perpetua. And in terms of sound, guys, I do feel like this particular brand of silver cable has slightly more body to the mids than does the Effect Audio Centurion. Although the Centurion might well out-resolve the Celesti just by 5% maybe, or maybe less than that, maybe 2%. So these percentages are very arbitrary, guys. This 2% can be something that I think once you hear, you're never able to unhear it. And if money is no object, you will chase that 2%. However, a lot of people, this 2% will not matter. So take that for what it's worth. Now, I do have a bunch of other cables here, guys. I have this cable from Marco Marco's Custom Cables, who's based out of Australia, which sounds amazing with the Jewel, but has a narrower stage than the Orpheus. But this is, of course, $400, 1/9 of the price or 1/12 of the price. This is a cable made by this Indian manufacturer, Ear Audio, who makes nice cables, very nice connectors and splitters. So I'll leave a link to all these guys in case you're interested in checking out cheaper cables. This is about $200, I think, or maybe $300. This is a basic Amazon cable that I paid $400 for. It's pretty nicely made. It's called Sinarn, I think. So all these cables can do the job, guys. However, what you pay for with this sort of a Centurion situation is that you're paying for more premium aesthetics. You're paying for this gold and silver alloy, which is just done really well. You're paying for a greater quality of finishing. You're paying for a slightly better technical performance, but it's ever so slightly better, guys. But at this level, you're also paying for audio jewelry, and there can be no denying that, because you sort of spend this money to also buy prestige. If you consider watches, like a lot of Rolex watches are amazing, obviously, handcrafted and all that. But you can get almost Rolex level quality with a lot of cheaper watches, like a Grand Seiko, for example, which tends to be cheaper than a Rolex for most models. You can get a cheaper watch, even a similar level of quality of construction and all that with a whole lot of other brands, honestly. But then the reason why you're paying for Rolex is because you're paying not just for the cost of goods, not just for the bill of materials, but also because of the heritage, the brand, the prestige, rather. So prestige can come from history. Granted, Effect Audio doesn't have the same level of history as Rolex, not even close. But for audiophile aficionados in the two-channel industry, I mean, what else do you pay for, right? What else do you buy and feel like your hard work is something that you can now use to spend money on a hobby that you love so much. So, and it's not easy making these cables, as can be evident. It requires years of research to develop the Effect Audio Ultra Flexi insulation, the PVC material that insulates this cable, for example. It takes a lot of research to get into the sort of resistance engineering with which you are able to insert gold into a silver a metal and make an alloy out of it. And so it does require a lot of research to come up with sort of loose sort of braiding that makes it supple and pretty. And then you're chasing perfection at this point. So at this point, when you have a bunch of really smart engineers who can charge a lot of money for their time, spending so much of their valued time in coming up with this perfect cable, it's understandable why you'd pay a premium for this cable. Of course, it's not just for sound, guys. You don't buy a cable like this for $5,000 only for sound. You buy it for prestige. You buy it because you want to reward yourself. You buy it because you worked hard and made money and you want to spend money and get something really special. But please don't think that these manufacturers are doing something illegal or illicit or just morally wrong, because they get their time is worth money. And these are some of the best people in the business to make cables. They obviously charge you for their time. And it's not just the bill of materials and the cost of goods. So that's it, guys. It is a special cable for whatever it's worth. I do recommend this cable strongly if you understand that this has a bit of brightness to it. But extremely resolving cable, I must say. It's not for everybody. But I hope this at least gets some of you to think about why people spend money on cables. And for those of you who are intent on buying a Centurion cable, I hope this review does shed some light on what to expect from a Centurion cable. Overall, it's very impressive, and kudos to Effect Audio and Music Tech for bringing this to many audiophiles all over the world. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for my next one. Bye-bye.